Hey, this is Pete Nguyen and PPN Creations here with,
Ricardo Andres Acevedo, fellow local indie comic creator from Los Angeles and editor as well.
and we are part of a Discord called the Self-Published Comic.
Society.
I don't even remember what to call it. It's comic something.
I think so.
Publishers,
For
comic
sure.
publishers.
Oh yeah, public publishers. It's literally right here, and I could check right now, but I'm just not. Hold on. What is this acronym? Yeah, the Self-Published Comic Society. There we go.
Self-Published Comic Society. That's
That's
what
a
we
mouthful.
are. Check us out on Discord. Um, and I have Ricardo here, uh, and something that just popped up on my feed is that Joss Whedon's Firefly is returning to returning, and it's returning in the form of a comic book through Dynamite Entertainment. You know anything about Firefly? I'm a big Firefly fan, but
I don't know anything. I know that like Nathan Fillion was in it. There are a lot of like people that we see nowadays that were in it, and I know it has a super passionate fan base. That's all I really know about it, is that like people feel like indignant about the fact that it only got one season, and they're like, this is an amazing series, and it just got axed like almost immediately.
yeah, it got one. So the fans are called Brown Coats,
Mm.
and there's one season, and then they made a movie called Serenity. And I actually was introduced to it through the movie Serenity, and I watched it backwards. So then I went back to the TV show and
Really?
watched it. So they kind of closed the loop with it. It was pretty cool. Like I said, I'm a big fan, and all those brown coats out there. Congratulations! That hopefully a comic book is at least a start for you. Now, Joss Whedon returning in some way. I don't know if he's writing it or not,
Yeah.
but uh, it looks like he's not. It's going to be Mark Russell, who's the writer.
Okay. Mark Russell for that. I don't know. I've never heard of him before. Mark Russell.
And look, here's the thing: the elephant in the room is that we all know Joss Whedon got canceled.
Yeah.
And I want to say he got canceled because of Justice League.
I
Or
think
is that
so.
one? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, look that up. I
Oh my
think he
gosh,
got
I feel like
canceled
such a
because of
fake
Justice
comic fan. Like,
League.
yeah, I'm less in the movie realm. I'm more in the actual like
Yeah,
comic.
yeah,
You know, they
yeah.
misconduct, toxic onset behavior, and severe power abuses that came to light. I just feel like that's so many. That's probably like so many instances of that happening like everywhere, especially in like the movie industry and everything. Unfortunate that like it sucks that people have to be like that when they get like a lot of power. You know what I mean? Like just be chill. Like we're all here to make a series or make it like a fan favorite sort of like TV show or movie. Like I don't know. There's no need to power trip.
So I guess here's a different question then. Like, how long how long do you get to not make stuff? How long do you get to be canceled until like it's okay for you to make stuff again? Or when you're canceled, it's forever.
What's the? Oh yeah, I guess some people probably like bite themselves in the butt and they like keep on posting like really toxic stuff on Twitter and Blue Sky and everything, and they just can't stop being awful. And in that situation, their cancellation is probably like permanent. It's just like indefinite. You're just going on forever, right? Unless someone from like PR or your agent comes in and is like, "Hey, you need to cut that out. Like, you need to quit it." And so I don't know. I haven't heard much from Josh Whedon lately, so maybe he's laying low. Maybe he's learned a lesson or two, and hopefully he's pretty nice when he comes back. But
Yeah, that's the thing. How long do you need to lay low for this instance? Has it been long enough? How like for you to come back? Like so, another guy who got and here's the thing. I'm going to admit it. I'm a big fan of Jonathan Majors acting. I loved his
mm-hmm.
um, Kang,
Just
and
Kang,
it
yeah.
really, dude, he's an excellent actor. And then he got canceled, and it's like you don't want to like not to say like it was not a big deal. Like what he did was
Oh, it
not
was a huge
cool.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah, what he did was not cool. What Joss Whedon was doing with whatever, like probably power tripped and whatever, like not cool or whatever. And so it's like, how long before they can come back if at all, to the spotlight. And like you said, sometimes it's never. It depends. It does depend, I think, on how bad it is, right? Like,
I think the biggest thing, yeah, I think one definitely depends on like court of public opinion. You know, 100% like what you did and all those things. Is it even possible for you to come back after being canceled? Right, like depends on whatever it is. I think the biggest thing that people want is just a straight up genuine apology. You know, like just that accountability, which apparently so many people lack. Unfortunately, it's just be like, hey, I messed up. I'm sorry, let you know, and and then you throw yourself on the mercy of the court, and if they take you back, then cool, you can start getting back into stuff again. But unfortunately, I think there are so many, especially like actors, who just double down, and it gets so much worse for them.
and yeah, my perspective on this is this: like, when you're canceled, it is a large part of it is, like you said, the court of public opinion. And so
Hmm.
some people may say it's unfair,
Hmm.
that it depends on how people feel about him. But here's the truth of it: it does matter. Like, if they and there's going to be people who are going to bring it back up and go, "You gonna forgive that? That's messed up." I was into this band. I can't remember it actually, but it was like one of these indie bands that I was into, and then one of them was trying to protect one of their band, or the band was trying to protect one of their bandmates from doing, like, having improper relations with an underage, like,
Hmm.
fan, right? And it's like, you're canceled forever. And every time they would try to bring themselves back, like 2, 3, 5 years, they would bring it up, and then that was it, right? Like, they just wouldn't come back. So,
Right.
you come to this thing, and I'm gonna admit, I was a big fan. I am a big fan of a lot of Joss Whedon's stuff. He had the sing along blog. Um, he had Dollhouse. Like, I liked all his stuff.
Hmm.
And so, as he's canceled, if he ever came back, um, and people bring up the stuff that he did, the court of public opinion, like you said, would matter. Like,
Right.
has that been enough time, right? And there's going to be people who will list, forever will say, which they have the right to, but forever will say, this is, well, he was terrible, he should never be able to come back, right? And then there's others that, it's going to be this whole thing. And then, just like for Jonathan Majors, like, eventually, like, he'll probably come back, and they'll bring up whatever, and it depends on how he reacts to it, right? Like, and it depends on
Right.
how the public feels about him. It's a thing. Again, I'm a fan of his, so I will say I've been kind of saying around my circles that I kind of like. So I'm a big Spawn fan, as you know, and
Hmm.
there have been Todd McFarlane keeps teasing a Spawn movie, and he wants uh, Jamie Foxx to do it, which I don't think that's a good idea, but like,
Hmm.
but whatever, like. But I've been thinking like that Jonathan Majors actually would be a strong candidate as his comeback role to play Spawn, because it would be an indie thing, and it'd be a niche
Hmm.
thing, and it's a rated R thing, right? And so
Right.
it's one of those things where, like, maybe that's his moment. But I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. Like, I just saw this while we were kind of setting up our podcast, and
Yeah.
like I was like, oh my gosh, like, Firefly returns, but it was a little bit misleading because it's in comics, but we are a comic podcast, so you know.
I think it's probably like beneficial to come back as like there's I think a sort of like hidden boon to the idea of making it a comic first, because it's much less expensive to create a comic than it is to create like an entire season of a TV show or a series. And so maybe that's sort of like a way to ease back into like the public eye of like, oh, like, is this something that people want? Are like other brown coats still like out there, in would they come out in full force for this comic? And if so, if the reception's good, I think then, I mean, it's very, very common, right, within this industry for comics to get created or, to get like a sort of deal out of like a TV show. I mean, look at like Something's Killing the Children, right? Like I know that was stated like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago or something that James Tynion the Fourth is making a, I think it was a Netflix series for that, but we haven't really seen much of it, I think, lately. Or like Lock and Key, like the Lock and Key series, Joe Hill, like that also became a TV show, and so maybe that's another way to sort of gauge that that interest for this series. And I think, of course, like we know, there's a lot of like fervent people out there that really want, a lot of fans out there who really want it to come back. So I think it's going to be a very easy sell. I think that it's going to eventually get another season, and I think that cast of characters would be more than happy to come back, like all those actors and actresses. Mm-hmm.
We were talking about people who were canceled and stuff from Joss Whedon, and one of the things that kind of came up off the air, we were talking about Neil Gaiman. Is it Gaiman or Gaiman?
I'm just gonna say Gaiman. I'm pretty
Okay,
sure. I don't know. It might be like a Michael Bubble Bublé kind of situation. I don't know. I'm just gonna say Neil Gaiman and just roll with it. You know.
y'all know about Neil Gaiman. Look, I'm gonna go ahead and say that Ricardo and I are big fans of Neil Gaiman. Uh, in that sense, like, uh, talk about how you're a fan, because I want to talk.
Yeah, like
I can go off for forever,
I
man.
I watched his the website Masterclass.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, like I had a subscription to that, and one of the only like classes that I really like saw, because I was trying to look for something specific for like comic creation, was Neil Gaiman. I knew he had written he'd written Sandman, he read like American Gods, Coraline, all these different things, and so I was super stoked to see what kind of information he had. So I've known about Neil Gaiman for such a long time, and he's undoubtedly been a massive influence on a lot of not only comic creators but just writers in general. And so finding out about everything that happened like 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago to the die. I remember it happening in the summer. Really was a blow to the community, and it like personally, I was just like, because I've yet to really like I haven't started the Sandman series yet, and so now I don't know if I'm going to, because it feels like it's kind of like he's marred his reputation so much that I don't want to like associate adjacently to him by like reading his stuff.
But it's a weird spot, right? Because like Cerebus is also has somebody who is basically a canceled dude, Dave Sim. But
Yeah.
man, we gotta read from issues 1 to 200 on that, and it's like, um, so here's my, like, I had a very similar experience. So I'm a '90s dude. I like, I'm my comics from the '90s. So like his
Yeah.
era was. So I have a very contentious like opinion back and forth about Neil Gaiman. And here's the thing:
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, he was fighting with Todd McFarlane. My most favorite episode, or sorry, issue
Mm-hmm.
of Spawn is the one that Neil Gaiman wrote,
Mm.
which is Spawn 9, which has Angela, one of my favorite characters,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, being a little fan, like Todd McFarlane fanboy, like Todd didn't pay him properly. So then he went to court eventually. I'm shortening this whole story, but like he
Yeah,
went to
in a
court.
nutshell. Yeah, yeah.
They fought, whatever. And then Neil Gaiman won Angela and all angels from Spawn, which is kind of messed up
Mm-hmm.
because Spawn is about a devil. So
Right.
if you take all angels, like it's like that's kind of puts the story in a bad spot. So I really hated Neil Gaiman for that, and I
Mm-hmm.
really hated him when he sold it to Marvel, who was paying him to try to put Image Comic out of business. And
Right.
so like
Mm-hmm.
you and I are big indie guys. I was still an
Yeah.
indie guy back then, and it's like, so I hated Marvel, I hated Neil Gaiman. And then later, like I grow a little more mature, I'm like, actually, it was kind of messed up. And Tom McFarlane is one of my heroes. He's like one of my heroes. So, but I think I can say that like it was kind of messed up that he didn't really pay him. You know what I mean? Especially being
Mm-hmm.
an indie guy himself, and didn't give him royalties and things like that. So I put all that in that. I went back and I started reading like the Sandman, like you were saying, and which, by the way, I have my own comic, my self-published comic, Spectre Outlaw. A lot there, some of the basic concepts of
Mm-hmm.
Spectre Outlaw came from the Sandman, and you were talking about how he had the master class. I also watched that
Yeah.
one, and I based like
Mm-hmm.
some of my writing process on that, which we'll talk about writing process and writing later. But
Yeah.
like, you know, getting besides the point about all that, like the kind of how I feel about him, it's like, just like you said, when I found out, and I found out through my brother, he's also a big fan of his. He
Yeah.
doesn't really read comics that much, but he did read Neil Gaiman stuff. He watched all the stuff, like American God, like all that stuff. Like he watched,
Yeah.
dude. he wrote novels. I was into all his novels, and then when that happened, I didn't know it was 2 years ago. It felt like forever, man.
Hmm.
Um, and when that happened, it was pretty devastating for me
Yeah.
because like I ended up being super into all his stuff, and you know what he did is pretty creepy.
Yeah.
And so, does he get? How long is his lead? Is it forever? Because he's like pretty old now, So he may go to the grave with that and not come back. I mean,
It's time will tell. This is, the world will either, look on him, with fondness for the stuff he's created, or they'll shun him. And like it's just totally. It depends. It like there's no way to tell. There's no
right,
absolutely no way to tell. I can only say for how I personally feel about the situation and about him. And I just think that his reputation is just kind of like forever marred by that. And yeah, it sucks, like, and that's kind of like a difficult situation, right? Is there's always like separating the art from the artist, but really, can you, how much of that can you separate when it's like something like Dave Sim, right? Or like Cerebus, like I can't even, like, I have no grounds to speak on with that because I just picked up a bunch of Jaka story,
hmm
like when I was in Portland, I picked up a bunch of like Cerebus, and I've never read it before, and I really want to get into it, but I know that in the latter half of his career, like Davidson kind of goes really off the rails, and so it's nice to read up to a certain extent. I think like it's weird that it seems inevitable for so many like people that are empowered to just like do stuff like this. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like I think that's the weirdest part is like it is so like it's so easy to just not do these things, in my opinion. Like, look, I'm not doing it right now. Like, dude, come on. Like it's
but when you have a platform and or when you have power, sometimes it changes you. I know that for sure. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like it would change me. I know that. Like, and I would just hope that my friends and everybody like would be able to check me. You know what I mean? Like, hey, bro, like, and I trust them, and
You're getting too out of
that,
pocket. Yeah, like
that's kind
whatever.
of the thing, right? Like Dave Sims an interesting, like, I'm gonna call it a case study because
Mhm.
because I was reading him when he was coming out. I was kind of late in the game, but I was into him and stuff because I knew it was going to end, and I was there when it ended, and I read whatever. But it's weird because you can read his stuff, and it was parody, and then it gets to kind of a serious situation, but it was like good. It was good stuff, like it's
Mhm.
serious. And then I think it's around 200 where he kind of lost it, and it's like, but it wasn't a like, oh, all of a sudden 200 is he went the way he was. It was like gradual. There's like little
Yeah.
bits and pieces of hints, and so it's like now when I reread that series, I actually want to see, like, I read for that. It's like it totally changes the context of what I'm reading Cerebus for.
Right. And so,
You know?
like, just as a creative in general, right? Like, we can understand when we're going through certain things in our lives, and that will find itself into our work, whether we kind of intend it or not. And so, I know that, like, in really tough, I mean, and every piece of art that, an artist makes or a creative makes is ultimately reflective of their time, their culture, just who they are as a person. And so, you can argue that, like, what Dave Sim was going through with his wife and everything, was like that really sucked and it was really unfortunate. And so, like, he looked at Cerebus as like just a means of an outlet of just getting it out of him, like otherwise. But even then, like, it was mad toxic, right? Like it was just like insanely like crazy what he was doing.
Yeah, it's weird, man, because like if Dave Sim created some stuff, would I buy it? Knowing, like, dude, I'm gonna be honest, I think I would, just
Yeah.
because I'm a fan of his old stuff. But then like he rightfully is canceled.
Yeah.
It's like it's weird, But speaking of writing, like, we're both comic writers, and we both hire artists to do our stuff. And so you are a working editor right now, which is pretty amazing.
Mm.
Um, because I knew you before that, so that was pretty cool. Like, how you were able to start developing that and stuff like that. But like, um, what kind of things about writing like do you see when you're editing, even like um where you see kind of pitfalls about like whether it's just new writers or current writers?
I think the biggest pitfall, the most obvious one, is when you're getting into comics writing as a medium. It can be very difficult to sort of like, especially if you're coming from a different form of writing that is like a bit more long form, that uses like a lot more like dialogue and writing and words. It's difficult to be, I think, initially cognizant of how much space you have on the page itself, how much real estate. And so like sometimes I'll edit stuff, or I'll have certain clients where like there's a lot of talking and a lot of writing, and like it'll be like 9, 10, 11, 12 panels on one page, and I have to tell them like this isn't going to work. Like you just don't have that much space, like you can't have this like 70 like word sort of like spiel, on this page, unless it's like the only thing that's happening, or unless you dedicate like a splash or a double page spread to it. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed with a lot of newcomers, and when it comes to comics writing, is the number one thing is one action per panel. I think overriding that sense of including like, okay, this character stands up and then they walk over to the door and then they open the window. That's all one panel. You can't do that. Like
You
like
can't.
you can't. The artist is going to be very confused. They're not going to know exactly what you mean, and they're going to do what they can. And you might not like the end product if you didn't write it well enough or describe it well enough.
Mhm.
That's number one. Number two is overwriting, especially like writing comics. I think writing works best when you realize that there are only really like 5 or 6 other people that are going to see this script, right? So you can at times just straight up just write to your artist, just talk to your team, say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about this page. What do you guys have any thoughts? What about this? What about that? You could even like, and this is something that I've thought for like very specific pages. If you have an idea of what you want and it has to be that way, you can even thumb it out yourself. Like it can be like very crude drawings, like, oh, this is what I imagine, especially if you're doing like a very, very creative sort of panel layout, and you're doing things like you're breaking the barriers, and and there's like a lot of gutter space, and there's just like cracks in the panels, or maybe someone's mind is like being shattered, right, and they're falling apart mentally, and so like you want to illustrate that visually. Having that sort of rapport with your artist and your team, and being able to talk with them and say, hey, like, are there any ideas? What do you guys think about this? What do you guys think about that? There's been a lot of times when I was writing my own series, Bird Turd, where I would write it a certain way. Like I had an idea of what it would look like in my head, but then my artist Chandler would do something. He'd be like, "Hey, can I try something?" And I'd be like, "Sure, of course." And he would do something that I thought was like 100 times better than what I thought about. So it's about that symbiotic relationship between the writer and the artist, and the rest of your team, and being able to trust them with your work. And so I would say, kind of digressing back to the initial situation, because I went super off topic, but one action per panel, big, big, big thing. I would say when you're editing your own stuff, you're self editing, dedicate an entire pass to that. Just making sure through every panel and every page that you're not writing in more than one action per panel. And then
So
number two, yeah, sorry.
so wait, yeah. Don't give your whole business
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
You can give one is good.
yeah.
So I want to talk about like that piece where you said writing a letter to your artist. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually that's what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I picked that up from Alan Moore. Now I don't write like Alan Moore
Oh,
because
no
he
one
writes
writes like
like
Alan Moore.
one panel. I know one panel is like
Essays.
it's like a 5 page essay is one panel and stuff. But like
Mm-hmm.
I like I like giving my just to kind of bounce off what you're saying. I like giving my artists concepts. So
Mm-hmm.
in mine, I will say I am trying to do these things in this page. So I'm going to put this, but there's suggestions. If you have a better way to frame it, like let's go with that, like whatever, because the artist knows what his strength is.
Right.
Um, so like, how do you think? What do you think about comics, like comic writing right now?
Like the quality of comics writing nowadays. I have, and I don't know how much opinion my weight will hold, because I don't read Marvel or DC. So I know that's a big aspect or facet of Western comic book writing.
Just to let you guys know out there, like I'm a big Image, but also like a really big Marvel.
Hmm.
Marlon's a big DC guy. Our third of our trio, here, Ricardo. He's the biggest indie guy. So
Yeah, I
just to give
like
a little
only
context.
I only read like Boom Studios, Image. I'll read stuff like Vertigo, Mad Cave every now and then. And also, I also specifically like to read a lot of like manga or like BD stuff from like Europe, more obscure stuff. I just got done reading a comic from Italy called 5,000 kilometers per second. That was a watercolor or a water painted, comic. So I like to go out there, but I would say, as far as the quality of writing, this is going to be a hot take. This is going to be or maybe it's not. I don't know. But my hot take is that comic writing as a whole is usually not very good. And I think a lot of comic creators can get away with bad writing as long as the art is really good. And you see this, a lot of times, like time and time again, in a lot of stuff. Of course, ultimately, like writing is, subjective, or like to an extent, it is subjective as long as you're not doing something, crazy. And
So let me
so,
ask you this: you the comic writing in general right now is not that good, uh, but you read mostly indie stuff. Is it
mhm.
that you read mostly indie stuff because mainstream comic writing isn't really that great? You know what I mean? Or is it
it's
just
it's more that I'm not really interested in, like, I'm kind of superhero fatigued of
uh
everything, like I loved, don't get me wrong, I loved the MCU up until like the end of like the Infinity War saga. Thought it was brilliant. I loved everything about it. I thought it was a perfect, sort of arc for everyone. I loved the way it ended. I loved everything about it. But I think there's a specific pattern to superhero stories, especially here in the West, that I've kind of gotten a bit too used to, and I want something different. And so I'm more interested personally in the idea of comics as a medium, rather than just like a sort of, the way that people conflate comics in the West with superheroes. So like, I can tell someone I'm a comic book writer, and the thing that might pop up in their head if they're not within the hemisphere of comics would be, oh, he writes like superheroes, right? Like that's usually the pipeline of what people will think if they're not familiar with comics. And so I'm much more interested in the idea of what you can do with comics and panels, and how to like tell sequential stories, rather than, just kind of going to doing the same thing over and over again.
which is interesting because uh, I like I like superhero stuff and people saving and black white heroes, very clear evil and good,
Hmm.
but I also like gray heroes and stuff, and so but then I also like some indie stuff too, although the indie stuff I do like, tends to be more superhero-y, right? So,
Right.
I guess the great thing about comics is that there's something for everybody. But I would agree with you that like comic book writing right now is a little weaker on the weaker side.
Hmm.
Um, and it's weird because like the writing itself, to me, like I don't notice,
Yeah.
right? For me, it's about like because you're an editor, you actually I would say probably more likely to notice like writing mechanisms and stuff like that. For
Or
me,
genre conventions and things that like
yeah,
pop up
yeah.
a lot.
For
Yeah.
me, it's I want to see if the story is interesting to me, is something
Right.
moving, is something like. But I also don't want a situation created where I cringe about it. Like I don't want
Hmm.
the superhero being put in a position where they're embarrassed. But it also depends on the kind of embarrassment and things like that. So it's just interesting like that.
So what I say, I think when it comes to the quality of comic writing, I think it's ultimately, and why I believe that it's not as good as it could be, or why it's not very good, is I think it's ultimately a symptom of the comics industry at a corporate level. Like when you think about Marvel and DC, you are having to write scripts within like a week tops. And so you don't have the time that you would usually have if you were indie publishing, to create stuff, to get an editor to look at it, to really like finesse it and make sure that it is the best thing it can be, because you got to get that off to the penciler. And then the penciler has to hurry up and get through that off to the colorist, and then the letter, and then the editor has to check it all off. And then it has to be ready every single month for that pull list, for your
It's like an
LCS.
assembly line, right?
Yeah, and so like it turns into this kind of like least common denominator. I mean, this always happens, right? With something when it gets like incredibly commodified, that it becomes this least common denominator type of entertainment. And so that's what I believe is that like if these writers ultimately had more time to write this, or and this we see with like special projects like Joe Kelly having written for like Spider-Man, and everyone has different opinions on how he wrote it, but I think, I Kill Giants, which is one of his like solo projects. It's a miniseries, 7 issues. It's one of my favorite comics of all time. And I think I Kill Giants doesn't get nearly as much love as it should. And that's one of his own personal projects. And you can tell because there's so much heart in it, you know? And so I think if these comic writers were given, ideally, if any creative was given all the time they need in the world to make all the stuff that they want, it would be a renaissance. It would be like this, the second renaissance. Like we'd be getting the best of the best cream of the crop writing, of all
So
time.
I find it's interesting that you say that because like when they're in the assembly line and they just got to write something, right? Like
Yeah.
the earlier stuff is probably not as good as their later stuff, is what I'm guessing.
Hmm.
Because, for example, you had mentioned Joe Kelly, right? Which I am actually a fan of his writing. And I
Yeah.
was
Same.
excited when he got put onto The Amazing Spider Man because I really didn't like The Amazing Spider Man for a while. Gave it a try. It was just, I didn't like it. And then
Hmm.
a lot of it was because of the artwork, I'm going to be honest, because
Hmm.
like I do not like John Romita Jr.'s artwork on Spider-Man. I like it on Daredevil. I do not like it on Spider-Man.
Hmm.
But now he's like the like thing that they're trying to copy, and I'm like, that's terrible. But
Yeah.
they switched to Joe Kelly on Amazing Spider-Man, and it wasn't. I didn't like it, and I got off it. And just this week, uh, I saw this cover right here,
Hmm.
and I was like,
Ooh.
interesting, interesting. Which here's the
Hmm.
thing: I get attracted by the cover. So I was like, hey, what's up? You know what I mean? Hello, little lady, come on over.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay. And then I started talking to this lady and I'm reading it and I'm like, dang, this is kind of pretty good. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. And I was like, I kind of like this. And so when you're saying that, I actually thought about that. I was like, you give him, I don't know how many issues he's in,
Right.
but he's a lot further in his run, which means he has more time, like you're saying, and maybe he found his footing. I don't know yet because again, I'm just starting. I was like, wow, this is like I just picked it up out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
Which all of us writers, as comic writers, we have to, we also have to understand that this issue may be an out of order issue that someone will pick up and might be the first thing that they see of it, and you
Yep.
can't just sit there and go, oh man, but if you read the first one, you would get it. Like, no, that's not how this.
That's
Works.
the biggest gripe I have with like usually like the Marvel DC comics is like I gotta read so many other runs, or like there will be a footnote that says, oh, if you want to understand this joke, read Thor 1 through 5 Ragnarok or whatever, you know what I mean, like and it sort of like deters me, and I think it also intimidates a lot of people that are coming into comics for the first time and being like, where do I start, where is the beginning point? You ask 100 different comic readers where to start, they'll give you 100 different answers.
Right. Right. Well, and if you want to, if I was to say, hey, you should read Amazing Spider-Man. It's pretty sick. You go, okay, where do I start? I don't know because we're about to reach Amazing Spider-Man 1000. Literally,
Yes. Yeah.
we're about
Literally.
to
Like, yeah.
reach. Even though this issue says 31 right here, it's actually really closer to 1000, which they're gonna do 1000, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
man, where do I start? Like, so I don't know. I see your point that like if you have a lot more time, you might see better stuff from the person, right?
Yeah. If you're not rushed, maybe if there's like also a personal connection, because a lot of these are just IPs that you're given, right? Like I think of like, when I went to go see Rick Remender, like a few like months ago, or maybe like I think actually it might have been a year ago, at an LCS. I asked him about like Frankencastle. And he was like, a lot of people weren't happy with the direction I took with it, but he's like, ultimately, I just wanted to try something different and do something new. And sometimes comic creators don't want something new. Most of the time, they don't. From what like they want this, and this is kind of like when you're in the service of like writing a specific IP, you are it's fan service. You're trying to sign off on like certain things that make Spider-Man Spider-Man, right? Like you know that certain things are going to happen because certain things have always happened in these Spider-Man comics, and you want to like be truthful to that, and because people are going to be expecting that. You know, it's like when you're writing genre fiction, you're told, hey, this is a horror comic. You know that there's going to be like a number of things like, oh, maybe like people are going to get killed in it. There's going to be a lot of blood. It's going to be gruesome. Your mind is already setting up these check boxes. And so the same thing happens when you're going to read something, you know, of a specific character IP. You know that there is something tonally about this character that needs to be like a pretty consistent through line through like all different writers through all different runs. And so experimentation can feel kind of scary, which is why I think a lot of writers will, especially for their more creative pursuits, save them for like their own personal projects, you know?
Yeah, so I'm a big Spawn fan, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I'm gonna be honest, like it's kind of boring, and I love Spawn. And the only reason why I picked it up really was the
Mm-hmm.
artist Brett Booth, and then like both Todd McFarlane and Brett Booth just recently left, and I've been thinking about like, how would I, as a writer, how would I write this to do the things you're saying, but then, dude, I would try to take a chance on it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to give me the
Yeah.
opportunity to write Spawn, like, what would I do? You know,
Right.
and like, I don't know, like, for example, like, if they gave me Spawn, right, and they're like, hey, Pete, you get to write, you get 4 issues, and if they're good and the people they're interested in it, then we'll pick you up for another 4, right, or whatever. I'm assuming it's probably going to go something like that, right?
Right.
And I would go, right now it's kind of a Marvel-ish thing in Spawn, right? I'm being a little
Yeah.
specific, but in in the sense of this, one of Marvel's big problems is the movies. Is it has to be a world-ending issue or like a country, and it's like this catastrophic thing
Yeah.
in order for this story to be interesting, this movie to be interesting. And so Spawn was falling under that. Like, is this, oh, all of heaven and hell is changing, all of like this big thing. And so I think I would, kind of in an Alan Moore sense. I was reading a lot of Alan Moore at the time. I was thinking this too, like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you do, Alan Moore? And when Alan Moore, if you guys don't know this, we're not a spoiler place, but I am going to spoiler this piece.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Warning.
uh, Swamp Thing was when he flipped it on its head and said that no, Swamp Thing is not some dude who turned into a Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is actually a Swamp Thing, right? And it changed the
Mm-hmm.
entire. And it was like, also, I started thinking that, and I was like, man, you know what? I think if I were to write Spawn, you gave me 4 issues to give me a trial. I would write it to where Spawn was just a regular dude with a regular job, like like in the movies, like Taken or something like that, right? Like where he's just like a regular dude doing like he's just people treat him like crap, and he could beat him up anytime, he could kill, like he's a world
Mm-hmm.
ender, but he
Right.
doesn't. He's just a regular dude. And now, why is he a regular dude? Because he's taking care of or protecting his daughter Cyan, who would be a like 20s, in her 20s now, or something like that. And I think I
Mm-hmm.
would start there, right, where it's like he's just a regular dude, and it's Cyan in her 20s, and then eventually you would write something where like somebody's messing with her a little bit, like a little bit something crazy happens, but and then Spawn has to do Spawn things, right? But I don't know, like just taking chances like that uh doesn't really happen, I think, in
Mm-hmm.
Marvel especially. Because I know Marvel most, even though I've been collecting more DC, but
Mm-hmm.
Marvel doesn't seem like they're taking those kind of chances. And so I don't know, just it's just kind of bouncing off what you're saying. Like, I don't know, what kind of good writing do you kind of see out there then?
A lot of the good writing that I tend, or what I, of course, in my opinion, find to be really good writing, and I usually lean more towards, something that's a bit more literary, and so something that doesn't have like a very specific genre. I really like, stuff from creators like Taiyo Matsumoto. So he wrote Sunny, he wrote Tokyo these days, and he also made my favorite manga of all time, Ping Pong, which is also its own anime. I think it's an 11 episode anime. Really enjoy it out there. And then I also like a lot of indie creator stuff. I love stuff like T.S. Luther's The Digger. Like the premise is, what if Indiana Jones was hunting short round? Like that's really like that's
That's
inventive and that's interesting and that's different, you know.
mhm.
And you're gonna find a lot of like really unique takes and you know different premises when it comes to like the indie scene, you know. And so really, really, and you're the most inspired stuff in my opinion. You know, stuff that doesn't isn't sort of like run of the mill superhero comic number 3,469. You know, you're gonna find like very unique stories. And what I'm that's what I ultimately you know plead with people who are like are getting into comics is that it's not just superhero stuff. It's a whole entire medium. And so there's comic memoirs if you want to read like Fun Home by Alison Bechtel or like Persepolis by like Marjane Satrapi. There's a lot of different stuff out there that will can really like it's for everyone's palate, you know.
All right, man. That was a good pod. Thanks a lot for coming in. We'll bring you in every so often because I know you're a busy guy. If you guys, I interrupted Ricardo in the middle of his editing, and so he's got to go
No,
back
no,
to
you're
his
chill.
thing.
It's basically done. I just have to. Yeah, and like the last month and a half, 2 months has been very atypical of me. Like I was traveling like all the time. Like I still have. I'm going to. I was in New York from like May 10th to like May 19th. Then I was in
Uh,
Oregon from like June 3rd to June 8th. And then I'm going to be in Hawaii from July 6th to the 14th. And
Dude,
so that never happens. Like that never ever happens. So usually I'm at home and I'm like rotting in front of my computer and writing or reading or editing or something. And so it's very that doesn't happen often. You know.
well, I
Um,
will say this: travel always helps me write better.
yeah,
So it's
I
always a
completely
good
agree. All
thing. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in. We'll check you out on the next one.
right, take it easy, y'all.